I was I was born Aaron H. to Michael H. and Laura S. in 1976, healthy and ready to have a normal life. This is my birth certificate, and here's my mom and dad, soon to be in this next photo. See me, a young, healthy kid. Later in life, I joined the military at 18, and my dad was gone by about 8 or 10 years old. And about when I was 30, we found out I was out of the military. Found out my dad was a Vietnam combat vet. He didn't tell anyone, but he was sick, and I was actually homeless part of my childhood. So I was a Vietnam combat vet child who was homeless, no VA support. That's a part of my story, but I still played baseball. My mom tried to raise me the best she could without any VA support, no child support. My dad, here's me in cross country in high school. And I was winning races, and I wasn't a retard. I graduated high school on time. Here's another article where I won a race. And I was a varsity athlete, really cared about team. And I joined the military with that kind of concept, team. Never thought I would be injured and ill fighting for my life. Here's a picture of me at prom and winter dance and graduation. And again, I never thought I'd be fighting for my life. My dad's Vietnam combat service didn't destroy me. My own military service destroyed me and my future. I graduated in 1994, and here's my enlistment package I signed. It's called a SAM, Sea Air Mariner Enlistment. We're going to describe this rare enlistment that no one knows about. Very few sailors ever had. And it was a unique, rare program that is no longer around. In the rare enlistment and the rare units I served in, all test in the 1980s and 1990s, that left me homeless, broken up with PTSD. Again, here is something that you'll see is my dad's dependency application showing my dad's address is unknown. The ship I was attached to, I was using my dad's last name. He was in my birth certificate when I joined the military, although he wasn't around when I was 18. I was still using his last name because on my birth certificate, and the recruiter used it. We found his American Legion Award, which proves he's a Vietnam combat vet. He's considered schizophrenic and with incompetency, and he can't take care of himself. But that's another part of the story. I'm a Vietnam combat vet, but I'm going to explain my own military service. Starting at 18, wanting a good life, joining the most elite military service in the world, the United States Navy. And it started at MEPS, Military Entrance Processing, is where all recruits go that join the military. And this is 1994. It's US MEPCOM, and it's run by the Army. The Army is the executive agent, and I ordered my records recently, medical issues, unclassified, on 2013 through email, and you can see they responded to me, unclassified, below is information regarding you, and it says I entered the Navy in 1994. I entered the Sea Air Mariner program, which was a reserve enlistment for me to go to college, become an officer, but they put me in these units that destroyed my life, that are no longer around. I used my dad's last name again. You're going to see that I got twisted, tormented me, so many things that I went through, and these programs and this enlistment are no longer around. This is my physical profile. Ones are good, meaning I was healthy at 18 when I joined the Navy. And you're going to see something really amazing. I joined the Navy and was sent to boot camp in 94, but I tried to switch branches. It was an 8-year enlistment and joined the Army halfway through. That should be a red flag. I tried to transfer from the Navy to the Army in 1998, under obligated service, transfer to the Army, get out of the Navy completely. So many terrible things have happened. And this time, at the same place, San Diego MEPS, using my mom's last name because I hadn't known my dad for over 15 years or so. I approximately. I'm using my mom's last name, and they knew that. Here's an example. I was using my mom's last name to transfer in the Army. This time, I was given a 3P, permanent disqualification, and 1s and 0s. A 0 is for psych, and a psych disqualification and a spinal disqualification. But the Army never told the Navy of my medical condition. This is a full Department of Defense physical, and they never told the Navy the results. This was hiding for the last 15 years in a database. I finally received it. Military Entrance Processing Exam says a 3P by Army regulation is permanently disqualified for enlistment, meaning I shouldn't have been in the service or medically discharged, or I should have been medically cleared with 3P to stay in Navy service. But they didn't tell anyone. I questioned the Inspector General in 2015 of the Army Inspector General, and they said in this letter to me, if you read it, that your request for a letter substantiating a METCOM or U.S. Recruiting Command, Army, committed an error, failing to tell your commander you're disqualified, cannot be acted upon because there's no requirement to tell them or notify the Navy what the Army found, which is bullshit. Which is completely bullshit, because I was sick, and you can see I was seeing, this is my Navy medical records, and there's multiple, I'll just put one here, but I was listed with multiple PTSD symptoms, I was depressed, and the Navy was recording this, but they weren't tying it to the Army records, because the Army never gave the Navy records. I should have been medically processed out in 1998. But I suffered all the way through to the end of my enlistment, even through 9/11. 9/11 happened, and here you can see March 17th, 2002, they were going through anti-terrorism training. And, I'm in the Navy still, reporting for duty every month, and I wrote it out all the way to the end. I was sick as a dog, stressed out, and I got an honorable discharge. And an honorable discharge in May 2002. May 25th, 2002, 8 years of reserve duty, and I saw San Diego Psychiatric Hospital as soon as August 27th, 2002, using Aaron S., my mom's last name, and I'm diagnosed with depressive disorder, and my GAF score is 65, which is low, meaning I'm not doing well. And basically, 3 months after duty, I'm seeing psychiatric people after my military service. I'm on disability determined as SSDI now, Social Security Disability. My life is falling apart. I have anxiety disorder and affective mood disorder. It was given to me in 2011. Now in 2011, they traced it all the way back to 2005 when I was in a suicide hospital, as this effective date means. Now in the reserves, you don't get many benefits, and you can see I joined in 1994. This is my earning records, and all this is really military pay, and no benefits are given to reservists, barely any, for medical care. So they were just beating me up every month and then sending me home, and then and I was getting a disorder, and I wasn't making much money in the reserves, and I was going to college to become an officer, but I soon dropped out of college. And you can see I stopped working in 2003 altogether. Now I'm diagnosed with PTSD at the vet center by an Army officer. Here's a veteran information form, and it says I was diagnosed with PTSD. When I told my story finally, I put an application into the Department of Veteran Affairs, Oakland Regional Office, for disability service connection for support, so I can get benefits to get my life and get out of poverty. They denied everything from anxiety disorder, PTSD disorder, although I'm diagnosed by the VA with PTSD and getting treatment. They denied everything. It's been going on for 3 years. The VA has been traumatizing. You can see I get in violent altercations. This is just one picture of many violent altercations of me getting in bloody messes, and I have PTSD. I'm on this is website for homeless people and people in need, a nonprofit that's supporting me. Rally Point is a veteran website where I asked a question, and I was the only sailor I've ever met that did what I did, and I asked a very specific question. Am I the only one sailor ever in the history of the Navy to live this enlistment where I did? And I am 38 now. I enlisted at 18 with this enlistment that few sailors knew existed. I lived it completely discharged honorably. I had never met another SAM, Sea Air Mariner in the fleet. And I got some responses from high-ranking people I never met. Lieutenant Commander said, "Are there any Sea Air Mariner program folks in the RP land? I don't know. But if you see this, please speak up. This program is discontinued. It's a good thing. It was an atrocious program." Master Chief, Petty Officer responded, "This was a terrible program unless you augmented it when active. There was no real training, and majority of these reservists would get no real benefits, and including me, for healthcare especially. Glad it's been disbanded. I don't know who thought this one up, but it was under diabolical genius." Well, let's explain the SAM program. The SAM program started in 1984, and it's described in this 1983 Navy magazine, The Reserves of Force and Readiness, describes the SAM program. "We have the Sea Air Mariner program in the works now for recruiting non-prior service people," Admiral Dunn says. "This is an outgrowth of the Ready Mariner program. We're going to expand the present program of 2,000 to some 10,000 recruits in 1984. During the build-up in the Cold War, they were expanding the force." And then he also goes on to say this, which is one of the most important things that I'm going to talk about. "Part of the settling in process with his new job involves Admiral Dunn's carrying the word of the active Navy." Active duty means full-time Navy. "His intent on correcting certain misconceptions. Just because an individual wears the uniform only 1 week in a month or 2 weeks in the summer and someone else wears it all year long doesn't mean the first one is less of a sailor or less of a naval person. What he means is bigotry, looking down on, name-calling, harassment of reserves by active duty, which I experienced in my command. I got beat up, I got harassed, I got tormented, bullied, the worst things, physically assaulted, military sexual trauma, and that doesn't include the weapons and the chemicals and the hazardous duties. My life fell apart over these 8 years, not including 9/11. Let's keep on describing Center for Naval Analysis. Describes in 1987 this: "Historically, most selected reservists are Navy veterans. Navy veterans already have benefits from the VA when they go through 4 years of active duty, but a reservist like me with the SAM program doesn't have any benefits for veteran health care out of duty in between reserve weekends." So that's a very big thing to know here. But 90% plus are Navy veterans coming into reserves. And then alternative ascension policies describes from Center Naval Analysis about the Sea Air Mariner program are non-prior service recruits who take recruit training boot camp and directly enter selected reserve without service in the active duty. About half of the SAM recruits are sent to A school to acquire training, which is advanced training. And advanced training is, something I never got. I just got boot camp and was sent home. And sent home for 8 years to get a college degree. And here's another thing. The restriction on promotion of unrated SAMs may not be accurate, but the Naval Reserve has no previous experience with non-prior service, non-A school personnel. No advanced training. There is some doubt that a rating can be earned through only part-time on-job training. Well, in the Navy, it's impossible nearly to learn advanced technological warfare skills in just part-time training with no prior full-time training. I learned that the hard way. You'll soon see. The Naval Reserve Sea Air Mariner program started a little program that in 1985. This is a new program, and they tried all sorts of different variations out. Presently, the Naval Reserve Force has a critical shortfall in one job called HM, which is your corpsmen, which are your medical personnel, and the construction battalion Seabees. The Commander Naval Reserve Force has requested to facilitate recruiting efforts under the SAM program dedicated to enlistment HMs and the RAMP program. But of course I never got this. This is just an example of some of the things I never got, but that weren't offered to me that would have helped me. But the VOTEC component, vocational training of the SAM program, involves sending the personnel to regular 8-week Navy recruit training, which I did go to, and then to civilian school like community college in your home community for completion of the Navy-related VOTEC training. And if you're a corpsman and you go to nursing school, then you'll become a nurse, and then you can become a nurse full-time. And then when you're called up to active duty, you could be a nurse. That's the idea here. You're getting training, you have a full-time job in the civilian world, and then your reserve duty just complements that. That never benefited me. I never got this program. So this program, additionally, the reservists received $2,000 as a bonus, successful partition of SAM program for critical occupation areas. Implicit in this program is the idea that reservists intend to use the same skill in their full-time occupation as the reserves will be greater benefit to the Navy. Reservists use their skill only on their drill weekends. But of course that never happened to me. How did they advertise? The Collegian 1987 put out how they advertise. 1987 they're advertising this to college students. I was just out of high school, so it didn't apply to me, but in the Collegian they're advertising this: live the adventure 1 week in a month, get tuition assistance to get your degree, part-time, you're a weekend warrior. I was right out of high school, I was going to become an officer, and they specifically were advertising the SAM program. But I, out of high school, had an ambition to become an officer and use the SAM program and be part-time Navy, also ready to go to war at any time. But then I'm going to be in the reserves and getting tuition assistance to become an officer. Well, let's describe the era and the manpower requirements reports. In 1993, the year before I joined the military, this is 10 years after the SAM program started, the Navy says this: the Navy must be able to fill key positions and perform its mission successfully and safely. Therefore, the recruiting and the retention of high-caliber officer and enlisted personnel to man our technologically sophisticated fleet is a high priority. In 1993, the Selective Reserve enlisted members' aging component says this: that only 1.8% of the Naval Reserves are actually 17 to 19-year-olds. Individuals in equipment-intensive high-technology fields such as those found in the U.S. Navy Reserves and the Air Force National Guard and Air Force Reserves usually are more experienced and therefore older. So I was the youngest and the highest technologically advanced program, the U.S. Navy Reserves, unlike the Marines, unlike the Army, and not supported. And this program, believe it or not, was being shut down. In the 1994 Manpower Requirement Reports, Department of Defense lists this: how many sailors. This is a downsizing era. It's going down in manpower in the 1990s, unlike the 80s, and there's 600,000 approximately sailors, Navy, active duty, and reserves in the Navy manpower requirements in 1994. Of those 600,000, they're only tracking, as you see, where my boxes meet, 900 SAMs. How many is 900 out of 600,000? Very few. Well, let's go into the numbers. I was like minuscule amount. I never met another SAM in the Navy when I was serving, and because there weren't many of us. The Sea Air Mariner program, it says at the bottom, specifically a non-prior service ascension program inaugurated in '84 to help the reserve meet its junior enlisted mobilization requirements, is drawing down to maximize the retention of more highly skilled veteran personnel coming off active duty. An offshoot of the program, there's two versions. The Sea Air Mariner program 2 developed specifically to place individuals serving 2 years initial active duty on board frigates, guided missile frigates, or frigate class trainer program, was the cancellation of FFT program. They canceled that also. In 95, they report this. The Manpower Requirement Reports, in 95, they completely stopped tracking the SAM program. And look at the bottom, both the SAM and the SAM2 programs are eliminated in 1995, but guess what? I joined in 1994 and they just completely stopped tracking the SAMs, I was one, and my whole future was stopped being tracked, and they didn't even support it anymore. I was like this lost bird in this big world in the sophisticated Navy, and I was trying to go to college, become an officer. They stopped the program. They eliminated all the versions of it. And guess what? I ended up in a frigate program, and the frigates that they weren't even meant for my enlistment, because I was not a SAM 2, I was a regular SAM. But they put me on the frigates anyways. But none of this I knew before I joined and went to boot camp. This is all I've learned recently through the internet. But here I am in boot camp. I went to boot camp in 1994. Being a varsity athlete, I was ready for team. I was a go-getter. I was athletic. I'm at the top. There's me in yellow. And this is the training guide, nearly 600 pages of recruit training for Navy. I just picked out a few of the things, but they never teach you about reserves. They never teach you about the differences between reserves and active duty. They only teach you the code of ethics. They teach you all the basics of being a Navy sailor. They don't have separate classes to teach you the differences, and there's huge differences. They teach you the chain of command. They teach you so many things like the Sailor's Creed or General Century General Orders of a Century, but they never tell you how the limited benefits a reservist get. They never tell you a reservist doesn't have medical benefits out of duty with the SAM program. They never tell you the SAM program is being shut down. They never told me that the SAM program is going to put me in hazardous duties every month of my life and then send me home without medical care. And they never told me that I'm going to be put in a unit that's going to kick my ass every month, send me home feeling sick, then I have to go to college. And they teach you stuff like, small arms and all sorts of stuff. They never teach you anything about the difference between me and an active duty sailor. I thought I was an active duty sailor. It trained me like that. They never told me my limited benefits and the limited health care and anything that I would set me up for failure. They just trained me, as it says right here, we are all shipmates and teammates. But they never told me I was like different and I had less benefits. They set me up to expect something that was not going to come true. I was going to be put in hazardous duties with no health care, but I thought we were all shipmates and teammates, and I'm finding out now I'm nothing. They don't want to, they're trying to forget me. I was the best recruit in boot camp. Here's my certificate of appointment, meaning if you read that, appointment to pay grade E2 upon completion of training, meritorious, awarded to only a top few graduating trainees by virtue of astounding performance. I was the best recruit. Well, let's go over the SAM program. There's two versions of it, and this is the actual definition of the SAM program. And if you read about it, there's SAM program version 1, which we already realized, an 8-year military service obligation. And then at the bottom it says the SAM program, Naval Reserve Activities, Reserve Centers are responsible for assigning SAM members to appropriate selective reserve drilling units following completion of boot camp, initial active duty training. But I'm going to say I was put in an improper, unappropriate drilling unit. I was put on a ship, which was meant for a SAM 2. As you soon see, there's a SAM 2 version. But since they shut down they weren't really managing this SAM program anymore. They put me in the wrong unit altogether, which was going to set me up for failure and long-term illness and long-term repercussions of damage. Here's the SAM 2 program, which is another version of the SAM program. And let's read the definition. The SAM program, members enlisted under the SAM 2 program incur an 8-year military service obligation. The first 2 years are spent on initial active duty, which consists of recruit training, boot camp, followed by either A school or apprenticeship training, advanced training, and assignment on board designated Naval Reserve Force frigate trainers. The remaining 6 years are served on Ready Reserve, or as you would normally know it as weekend warriors. But the first 2 years are spent on these specific ships they tried out and they tested out, little experimental ships that are no longer around. They only lasted for 2 years. This whole program was shut down. The SAM 2 program was a little experiment meant specifically for reserve ships or ships that had active duty sailors, but a few reservists that were showing up every month. And you're going to soon see I was put on these ships without a SAM-2 program. We're going to experience Navy Reserve units. This 1987-1988 Army report explains reserve training for the United States Navy. Reserve training for the United States Navy reports there's 2,970 units in 250 locations over 50 states. Now, this is a report by the Army. And the President Annual Report to Congress by Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense, shows the map of all the reserve activities over America, including Wyoming and other places where there's no ships. But I was in San Diego, and this is where the ships were. I was in 32nd Street where the ships were. They're only, as you see, the Navy Reserve Force structure, there's only 2% of all the Navy units, 2,970 units, where 2% of them were ships. Very few ships in all the Navy reserves. I was on these ships. That was my home duty station. Now, most reservists go to a reserve center. This is an example of a reserve center. A reserve center, you're not in the water every month. You're not getting seasick. Here's an example of a reserve unit at a reserve center, taking a nice photo. But that was not what I was doing. And these reserve centers tried to mimic in Baltimore, Maryland, a real Navy ship, and they put damage control training testing equipment on base to mimic damage control training, but I was in the real deal. I was in the real ship trying to learn it on the fly. In 1992, these reserve ships were considered Mobilization Force Category A reserve surfacing combatants and amphibious warfare ships. Very specific term that the Navy was tracking in 1992. Again, a very unique time in the Navy period in the 1990s, downsizing era. And the Mobilization Force Category A under Naval Force Structure 1997 shows that there's only 16 ships out of 456 that were Mobilization Force Category A or Reserve Surface Combatants. I was on one of these 16 units for 5 years, part-time, no active duty experience and no health care that I could access for health care. And here's further explanation. The Navy Innovative INRC implemented the part of DOT reconstitution program, 8 FFT frigate trainers, FFT programs in 1992. Again, this is a very specific program. We're going to go over these programs because this is where the mix-up was. This is where I would become injured. The frigate, these are frigates, fast frigates, 1052 Knox class frigates, all which have been retired for field protection of shipping, POS, mission of anti-submarine warfare, combatants for amphibious and expeditionary forces, underway replenishment groups, and merchant convoys. The Knox class frigates initially formed the backbone of innovative reserve training program. Under the program, the last 8 ships remaining in service were designated Type 2 reserve training frigates, while the 32 other frigates were deactivated and designated Type 3. The Type 3 ships can be completely reactivated in 180 days. Each of the 8 reserve training programs, reserve crew also designated 4 nucleus crews, which had 32 Type 3 ships. Reserve training frigates were to be home ported in New York, Mobile, Ingleside, Texas. But inactivated in 1984. The reserve training program was enacted in 1994. The same year I joined up. The whole program was inactivated. Amazing, right? Here's an example of one of these ships, the McCandless, assignment to the Naval Reserve Force Atlantic, where she was reclassified as a frigate fleet trainer in 1084. McCandless was only 8 ships in her class. What took the place of the frigates, the guided missile frigates, these FFs? Well, I'll tell you what took the place. My ship, the FFG's comparison of the Naval Reserve Force Structure Historical Plan. Well, by 1995, there was no more FFs. They took them off in 1994, and they started replacing them with frigates, FFG's, guided missile frigates, the newest class of frigate. I was going to be on these frigates. Did they put the FFT program, the Frigate Fleet Training Program, on an FFG? Well, they considered it, and here it is: roles and mission studies, initiations, implement FFT concept on FFG, and it says not initiated. So they never put the FFT program in an FFG. I was serving on an FFG without a frigate-free trainer, meaning there's no special training program for reservists. And with me never serving active duty, I had to pick up everything on the fly, OJT, with there was no special training program, which just started destroying me because it was overwhelming. Here's my ship, USS Size. It's impossible to learn on part-time duty. It's a guided missile frigate. Anything can kill you on the ship. It's dangerous as hell every time you're on it. I was on it every month, and I was starting to lose my mind. Here's my ships. Not a reserve center, USS Copeland, USS Sides for nearly 4 to 5 years of my life when I was going to college to become an officer and take this whole thing as a career, and I was going to be in the Navy full time. I mean, my idea was to become an officer and go full time and make a career. I was 18 when I joined. They never told me that SAM program was shut down. They never told me these units were very few in number. They never told me the SAM enlistment was rare. They never told me, I didn't know anything because I never served active duty. I was like this lost kid going there with full pride and dignity, trying to think, I'm going to do something with my life. And every month I'm getting scared to death. Eventually I got assaulted by the active duty sailors. Some guy tried to have sex with me on the ship. And I got an anxiety disorder and my life fell apart. And in the Army, I even tried to transfer in the Army and they disqualified me medically. But they didn't tell the Navy nothing. Well, here's a report from how bad these ships were. By an executive officer, Thomas Rosey, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy. Tell the truth. Can the operational commander rely on the advertised capabilities, Naval Reserve Force surface assets? He's talking about these FFGs. In 1995, he writes a report on the FFG. Is a relatively low-cost surface combatant whose primary mission areas are anti-submarine warfare, anti-air warfare, and anti-surface warfare. Now he's writing a report, and you're going to see exactly the problem. This is an intelligent man. A ship is an independent, self-sustaining city. It requires not only the complete integration of the crew, but the coordinated orchestration of qualified professionals, well-trained professionals to sustain safe and effective operations at sea. Shouldn't be a surprise. You need to be full-time trained. 1987, a policy of horizontal integration was adopted, which directed the assignment of modern ships and aircraft to the Naval Reserve. By 1992, a total of 35 ships were transferred to NRF FFGs, including 16 Oliver Hazard Perry class. Leaders of Naval Reserve community are working hard to increase the operational role of the NRF FFG. In August 92, Commander Destroyer Squadron 6 Donnelly chaired a process action committee team which developed inter-deployment training cycle tactical training strategy for FFG Class 7 ships, which I was on, active in reserve. And it says the new tactical training strategy notional scheduled for NRF ships is specifically designated to walk the ship through the exact same process as the active FFG, such that at the conclusion of basic, intermediate, advanced training phases, the NRF FFG is comparably ready and its active battle group player counterpart. They want us to be the same as the full-time trained guys. So why do we man 16 of the 51 FFGs and the FFG class to only 70% their allotted manning and say a needed national crisis, we will augment these crews with quality personnel who have less than 24 days of integrated team training each year? It makes no sense, right? I don't know who thought this one up. Well, the active duty ships had 221 sailors active duty. And here's the difference. The active duty NRFGs, which I was on, we only had 150 active duty, meaning the 150 active duty were less manned and were angry because they had more work to do with less manpower, and they had to pick up the slack for the reserve unit who was there only part-time. And guess who picked up the slack? I got the slack. I got bullied and beat up on, and I started getting anxiety disorder. These ships do not just get underway for training of CELRES personnel. Consider the fact that CELRES personnel train only a total of 38 days each year. This means the vast majority of NRFFG's underway time is spent with minimal augmentation of CELRES personnel, meaning I wasn't well trained. It makes sense, and I wasn't trained in the team very much, and they didn't trust me. So you can see I was basically fighting an uphill battle 1990, the Department of Defense conducted a total force policy review in which they admitted shipboard duty might not be satisfactory application of a Naval Reserve Force structure. And I didn't have health care. I keep on repeating that. In 1990, the Department, and they're putting them on the ship every month. The Secretary of the Navy, John F. Lehman, has stated, you can't have weekend warriors manning a fleet that is forward deployed. My ship was forward deployed. They went on deployments, and I was there part-time every summer. And, didn't know much, and I was scared to death half the time. Intelligent, caring parents do not take their children to medical surgeons who only practice medical medicine 38 days a year, and where only 24 of those days demand the attendance of a full surgical team. See, I was trying to operate in a full surgical team with minimal training and considered part of the gang, and they never invited me to do anything. I wasn't part of the gang. I was just there in survival mode, doing dangerous things. This is because most people acknowledge surgical medicine requires extensive training under careful supervision, and after certified completion of training, competence is only achieved and maintained through practice and reevaluation tempered with periodic advanced training. But I never got that. I was only there part-time, sent home, thinking I'm going to become an officer. Then I dropped out of college because I got overwhelmed. This is an impossible task. The skills required to professionally and safely operate a ship at sea may not be equivalent to skills demanded of a medical surgeon, but there are similar consequences to be paid if either profession attempts to work in his or her trade without adequate training, meaning you can die if you don't know what you're doing on an active duty combat ship, which I was on every month for 48 hours, at sea mainly. I could die, that's what they mean. Consequences are similar. There will never be equal to their active ships. Sister ships immediately upon mobilization, because the selective reserve portion of the crew receive neither the quantity nor the quality of training received by their active duty counterparts, neither as part of the team nor as individual crew members. And I was undertrained, young, and I never served active duty, but all the other reservists on my unit did serve active duty, so that was a big difference. In short, there is very little room for unqualified, untrained sailors at sea, of which I was unqualified and untrained. As long as the NRF FFG go to sea in their current configuration, they are dangerous to themselves and operational commander. And I was in danger by myself, being untrained and unqualified and just scared to death, and no health care when I went home, but I really wanted a career. Now we're going to get into the training, the regulations of the Navy, for the ships. Here's the regulation: Surface Force Training Manual, Department of Navy, Atlantic Fleet and Pacific Fleet, 1995. 1999. I joined in 1994. I was on these ships till 1999, and they had a special section in here. This is mainly meant for these active duty ships. There's 100 pages of manuals on training, because this is a professional thing we're doing to run a Navy ship. Well, Section 3 has Naval Reserve Force Training Readiness, ComNav Reserve Force Instruction 3502. They extrapolated Master Training Plan. Master Training Plan for these reserve ships, these very few reserve ships. The training philosophy. The primary objective in the training of select reserve is the integration of individuals and units with their active duty counterparts. Integration permits the selected reserve to perform the same or similar functions as their personnel assigned to active duty, and enhances their ability to perform their assigned mission when mobilized. It makes sense, but if you're only given 2 days to do something that's highly technological, there's a chance you're not going to be able to remember it the next month. The Naval Reserve Force training requirement, the specified wartime mission for Naval Reserve Force units require that training requirements remain the same as active duty counterparts to provide the benchmark for measuring actual status of NRF readiness, meaning I had the same benchmarks as the active duty guys. Remember that these reservists are members of your command, and most of these individuals have previous active duty experience. And when you have previous active duty experience, you have full-time VA benefits. You have a DDT-14 already. I never had previous active duty. I never had that to rely on. I had no health care when I went home at 18, and I was trying to go to college to get a degree to become an officer. But they keep on propping up the active duty experience. I never had that, and I didn't have benefits either. But I was in these units every month. Personal qualifications. NRF ship commanders are to assign all primary crew selective reserves to Condition 1 and Condition 3 watch stations. Selective reserves will use Personal Qualification System PQS to train for final qualification in these watch stations. Now, what is Condition 1 and Condition 3 watch stations? We'll soon find out. That's battle simulation. I was going through battle simulation every month of my life practically, and this can cause an injury just by itself. Reserve training environment. And active duty training is accomplished 2 days per month, usually on the weekend, and annual training is accomplished 2 weeks per year. So in this short amount of time, I'm supposed to get the same benchmarks as active duty without the benefits of active duty health care, without the benefits of any extra pay, and with limited pay, limited benefits, and limited training. I'm supposed to be ready to go and get beat up every month, and I did get beat up every month, and I lost my mind. And here's the SORM manual, Standard Organization Regulation of the U.S. Navy. OPNAV, this is 1994. In fact, this is the exact regulations also that will explain the training of the Navy, and especially warships. It's called the SORM manual, and they describe Condition 3 and Condition 1. Condition 1 is general quarters, which is battle simulation, and then Condition 3, wartime heightened tension readiness. I was going through this every month practically on the guided missile frigate, working alongside fully trained active duty sailors. Condition 1, general quarters. Condition 1 requires the manning of all weapon systems, sensors, damage control, and engineering stations. Material condition zebra is set throughout the ship, and engineering systems are configured for maximum flexibility and survivability. With all hands at general quarters stations, the ship is prepared to fight at its maximum capability. Yes, we were put high stress environments, ready for war every month. It's called battle simulation, and it's called GQ. And then there's Condition 3, wartime heightened tension readiness. Condition 3, watch stations require sufficient number of personnel to man a limited number of weapon systems for long periods. Condition 3 must provide the capability to conduct or repel urgent attack while the ship is called the general quarters. This non-weapon related requirement of Condition 4 also applied in Condition 3. I went through these conditions. They tried to qualify me in these watch standing things, and I never served active duty. And every month I'm getting beat up, overwhelmed, sent home, and I couldn't remember all the details, and it just starts breaking you down. Shipboard methods of training. This is for active duty, believe it, and I had to mimic this. There are a variety of methods to choose from conducting shipboard training. The selection should be based on the method which best meets training objectives. The use of standard lesson plans is encouraged for formal structured training. So let's go over this formal structured training of active duty sailors, which I was on an active duty ship every month just part-time, so I never got the benefit of this. But this is what active duty benefit from. On-the-job training, OJT. Officers and senior petty officers and the daily association with subordinates must encourage professional development. On-the-job training is personalized means of teaching and developing professional skills. All OJT must be high-quality, correct, monitored OJT results can be measured effectively and informally. But I never got this. I was only there for 2 days a month, thrown in the heat, and sent home. They never monitored me at all. Never monitored my health care. Team training is watch battle station assignments is best accomplished through drills, exercises, important underway. But how much training and drills and exercises can I retain and over 2 days and 2 weeks in the summer? I forget it. It overwhelms you. And here's another part of it. Normal active duty sailors on a normal active duty ship go through indoctrination training. Indoctrination training goes over safety, security, medical services, morale, religious services, legal services, educational, personnel procedures, total quality leadership, history, mission of command, unit routine. I never got the benefit of this because it's only there for 2 days. You can't go through an indoctrination program in 2 days. Command sponsor indoctrination programs are designed to facilitate the adaptation of service members and family members to a new working and living environment, reduce some of the anxiety associated with PCS moves. They knew new commands caused anxiety, but I'd only be there for 2 days and sent home, and I had anxiety. They discussed anxiety right there. General quarters. Department of Defense, dictionary military terms, general quarters is a condition of readiness where naval action is imminent. All battle stations are fully manned and alert. Ammunition is ready. And I was going through this training or experience every month, high stress environment, and a real active duty combat ship, and sent home alone with no health care. And then the Secretary of Navy, Instruction 1854E, Department of Navy Disability Evaluation Manual, in fact says this about disability evaluation. Combat-related injury can be incurred under conditions simulating war and incurred while engaged in extra hazardous service. Not just boots on the ground in Iraq or Afghanistan, but conditions simulating war. Conditions simulating war in general. This covers disabilities resulting from military training, such as war games or practice alerts, because the stress levels are so high, they can start breaking you down. And if you can't, you don't build stamina just being there part-time and sent home. I could never adjust to this lifestyle on just a part-time thing. And that's another thing. Can get an injury just from the training. This shows my evaluation reports and counseling records. Here's on the ship. My job duties are all hazardous. If you don't know the details of these things, they're high technological and require a lot of training the full-time guys got and I didn't get, that can kill you if you don't know what you're doing, that you risk life-ending results of bad conduct and anything if you fuck up. And I was on these ships for years part-time, and I just started cracking, and they didn't monitor me. This is my job skills again, and they're hazardous. And we're going to go over the training manuals, which are hundreds of pages long, which is and everyone knows the Navy's a professional career. It's not meant for part-time rookies on a Navy ship. And they shut these programs down. A normal Navy seaman who's part-time gets full-time training and becomes a professional. And these are hundreds of pages of booklets of the listed manuals for training. You can't learn it part-time. And it's all dangerous work, as we'll go over. These are just the front pages of the training manuals that I was supposed to learn on part-time training and then pretend I knew what it was. And then and these things literally can make you sick or kill you if you don't know what you're doing, because you're around radiation, you're around just all sorts of things that are that can kill you if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not aware of what you're doing, if you're not there every day. It's like impossible to understand. But here's ammunition and gunnery, chapter 6. As a seaman, you may be required to man a gun stations or serve as a member of magazine crew, so it's necessary to have general knowledge of ammunition and guns in service. In many instances, watchstanders who fail to understand their responsibility and authority have caused a collision, grounding, or even loss of the ship. So there's a lot of warnings in these manuals. At sea, weather decks of a ship could be extremely hazardous, particularly aboard small ships, and the FFG is fairly small and does submerge. At any moment, the sea can submerge the main deck to a depth of several feet and may come unexpectedly over the brow, and you'd be washed over the side. Warning, all greases, lubricants, and cleaning compounds are hazardous materials. Avoid prolonged skin contact and always wear goggles when using these materials used in a well-ventilated area. I was put in these conditions every month and sent home without any follow-up medical care. Warning, synthetic rope may fail without warning, which could be catastrophic. To prevent serious injury or death from snapback action, personnel shall not stand in direct line or pull under any load. So again, I'm doing that, can kill me. And these are the skills that they suggest you have or should learn as a professional on a Navy ship. Judgment, decision-making, management, personnel resources, complex problem-solving, time management, speaking, management, financial resources, persuasion, quality control analysis, system evaluation, operational control. How are you going to learn all that in 2 days a month on a combat ship and 2 weeks in the summer? Impossible. They shut the program down, by the way, so the program's no longer around. That should be evidence. Abilities, time sharing, inductive reasoning, oral expression, deductive reasoning, flexibility of closure, speed of closure, written expression, reaction time, originality, and stamina. How do you develop stamina and reaction time and written expression and all these things in part-time training? Well, here's examples of what I would be in. This is the deck crew of a guided missile frigate. This is a guided missile frigate. I just made a square around an example, found a picture of a deck crew, and that would be me, and all the other guys would be fully trained sailors. I would be a part-time sailor there on the weekend. And this is the ships. These are about 8 guided missile frigates right there, sailing out in formation and showing off their Navy sea power, just to show you, examples of the ships I was on. And you're going to see how vicious the seas are. In 48 hours, you're going to get beat up. I'll show you how vicious the seas can get here in a couple of pictures. You get seasick. Here's one ship. And the seas aren't even that heavy in this picture, but the seas don't have to be that heavy, and the ship can submerge. It's very scary at times, and if you've never been around that, listing backside to side, and that's just the weather conditions. Here's the ship, 76 millimeter cannon gun. When you're first time you're around that, it scares you shitless. You've never been around a gun like that on a Navy ship, weapons testing. Here is me. That would be an example of me pulling my back out of place, trying to hold these ropes that can kill you if they break. Line handling. These synthetic ropes are known to snap back and kill. Here's damage control. I would be the sailor. The one trained guy in the red would be me, and just part-time trying to learn advanced skills of damage control. And here's the fourth part. Overwhelmed, and something called helmsman. Look at how detailed and extravagant this board is. This is where you drive the ship, and I'm learning this only on part-time training. Now if you're fully trained, it becomes more simple and understandable, but part-time training is overwhelming. You're just being thrown in a fire, and and you can never get used to it. I was there every month and getting overwhelmed. I started cracking, but I tried to hold it together. Here's damage control training through manuals. You learn stuff because it's all manual based qualifications, personal qualification systems. There's me in the yellow trying to pretend that I know what I'm doing, trying to fill out the same manuals everyone else is. Here's the ship listing. These are going to be deck crewmen who are holding on for their dear life because the ship is listing in the sea, and it's not even heavy seas, but you get seasick, something called sea legs. Now imagine being on a team, a full-time football team, NFL, and you only trained a couple days in the month, and now you're in the middle of a game that can break your legs because you haven't train that much. You're weak, your joints aren't strong, you don't know your teammates that well, and you're in the middle in front of a crowd in a high stress environment. Imagine going into college, a master's class, and everyone else there is fully trained master's students. They're 20 Monday through Friday. You're only there on Friday, but you have to take the same test everyone else does. Don't you think that might eventually start giving you an anxiety disorder? Imagine trying to just use part-time training and be safe jumping out of military airplanes on just part-time training, acting calm and collected like you know what you're doing. But in fact, less training creates the risk for injury, because less training, you don't have the ability to adjust. Well, there's the problem. Imagine being a tightrope walker with less training, thinking you're less at risk at being injured because you're there less. No, you develop skill through more training, and then you're more safe. Well, they said, because you're there less, you have less time to get hurt, and therefore you're more safe. It makes no sense. Job hazard categories. Every one of my job hazard categories were, by the Navy standards, category A with no health care. Industrial operations, including ship repair work, was job category A. Heavy equipment operation, including obviously guided missile frigates in the middle of the ocean, are heavy equipment operation. Toxic hazardous materials, I've already shown you. I was doing that too every month of my life on a Navy combat ship. Commander, Naval Service Force mishap analysis says this. What leads to mishap analysis? What are the primary factors of mishap analysis? Well, personal human error, specifically unsafe acts such as distraction or poor knowledge of procedures or improper procedures, lack of attention to detail, are major causal factors in in-duty mishaps. You're going to get injured if you don't know what you're doing. Part-time training doesn't give you any ability to develop professionalism. You're just hanging on for your damn dear life. As I became anxiety-ridden, how much pay and benefits was I getting for this? Current pay tables in 1993 for weekend warriors in the Navy was this: 4-hour training, 4-hour training. There's 2 training episodes a day, and 4 over the weekend would equal, depending on your pay grade, this. 4 times 25 is $100, or 4 times 31 is $120 approximately. That's how much I would be earning over the month. That wasn't all, because I was on a ship. I got sea pay, and you're going to notice it's called arduous duty. I was attached to a ship, not a reserve center. It's because I was attached to that I got sea pay. Sea pay. Career sea pay is supplementary allowance authorized to personnel assigned to recognize the arduous nature of this activity. Reservists do not receive sea pay while conducting regular additional drills, which is bullshit, you'll soon see. Active duty and TAR personnel entitled to the sea pay while assigned a ship are selected reservists conducting active duty training while on board AD or NRF units. I was on one as a primary crew. Check this out. 1403, special pay and allowances. Naval reservists may also receive other military compensation, whether pay or allowances, when authorized by Congress, depending on the nature of their duty assignments when military, especially where they are stationed, or duration of orders. Naval Reserve Fleet Pay. Reservists assigned to NRF ships, specifically at ComNAS Reservoir Annual Message, are authorized an additional $10 per IDT, an arduous duty period up to 60 IDT periods. I was in the primary augmentation crew of a guided missile frigate. As you saw my units, I was not attached to a reserve center. I was on a ship every month getting $10 extra per IDT, an extra $40 a weekend to do all these hazardous duties, get overwhelmed, get beat up, sent home. But I didn't get any extra health care, which is the major problem. Now we're going to go over something, the era of the 1980s compared to the 1990s. The 1980s is when they had the Cold War, and they were increasing the budget of the Department of Defense and increasing the size of the Navy. In the 1990s, they had the downsizing after the Gulf War, and they cut back on, and by some 30%, the Navy size of the Navy, and they shut down units, they shut down programs, including the SAM program. And here's an example of that: Naval Total Force budget, President budget 1999. Let's review this. Very important. Reserve employment. During the 1980s, the Commander, Naval Reserve Force, and Fleet Sinks established a memorandum of understanding stipulating that Sinks, who maintain operational control over NRF ships, would not use the ships to maintain Navy commitments. Instead, the Navy operations were devoted exclusively to training reservists for war. At the heart of it, a skeptical Congress is concerned that the Navy might actually use the NRF ships and other reservists to do Navy's day-to-day business. Times have changed. In the 1990s, today is an exception when a reservist performs annual training or additional duty training that doesn't provide needed service for the Navy. Over the last half of the 1990s, I joined in 1994, the Navy Reserve has provided over 2 million man days of support annually to a variety of commands, each day an average of 25,000 reservists, nearly one-third of the force, on active duty supporting Navy missions. Training still matters, but getting a return on investment matters too. They were getting the return on investment on a kid who had no health care, and they were getting the return on investment on me beating me up. Policy foundation. With regard to employment or utilization, Naval Total Force Policy OPNAV Instruction 100121B directs the reserve force will be used to relieve the stress of personnel, active duty personnel, and either deploy or enable deployment active forces. These words are carefully chosen. Fundamentally, unlike the 1980s, it is the Navy's best policy to employ reservists in peacetime. See, now the 1990s are trying to get more for less. And here's the actual instruction, OPNAV instruction 100121B, total force policy. It's a very specific policy. They're trying to use the reservists now. In the 1990s, and when I joined in 1994, unlike the 1980s, when the budget was bigger, now they're going to use the reservists, regardless if you had health care or not, to do hazardous duties anytime they could to relieve the stress of the active duty. And on a ship, that can mean a lot of things. On a night guided missile frigate, selective reservists consist of those units of individuals already reserved, designated by the CNO, approved by the chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, so essential to wartime missions. They have priority of other reservists. All CELRES are on active status. I was considered active status, similar to active duty, on a part-time basis on an active duty combat ship every month of my life. And I didn't get any medical benefits. beyond major injury like an arm falling off, any headache, any stress-related injury, any sore back, they didn't care about. I just was used to the maximum every month and hazardous duties and sent home, and I was considered active status, which is, they changed the status category of selective reserves in the 1990s, in fact. Training of reserve force. ComNav Res 4 is responsible to CNO for the peacetime training of selective reserves. The reserve training will mirror that received with active force and be conducted to meet the requirements to join armed conflict, meaning now, of course, without ever serving active duty, which is the first problem, I'm going to mirror the training received active duty without active duty benefits. Don't you see a problem there? It could be a big problem. In fact, it could really injure a young man's future. The policy. The Navy will retain active and reserve forces and personnel adequately resourced to accomplish their assigned wartime mission to meet the peacetime contingency requirements. During peacetime, Navy will employ reserve forces and personnel to relieve the stress and active operating tempo, op-tempo. General. The Naval Reserve supports the mission of the Navy as described in Title 10, which states be prepared to conduct prompt and sustained combat operations at sea in support of the U.S. national interest. Again, U.S. Navy in the 1990s is pushed to the max. Within the governing concept, the mission of the reserve component is, as defined in 10.0 U.S. Code Title 10, 5 train units, qualified persons available active duty, armed forces at time of war, national emergency, and other times the national security required. Throughout the Cold War, 1980s, this meant training and structured in Naval Reserve for full mobilization and support of global conflict. But that changed in the 1990s because the Cold War is the 1980s against Mother Russia and the Soviet Union and communism. The 1990s, budget cuts, they changed everything. Reference A through F direct a new strategy in the 1990s. Demands like the reserve be prepared to respond to entire spectrum requirements, including war, national emergency, contingency operations, military operations other than war, peacetime contributory support, PCS, or humanitarian operations, full or partial mobilization, including pre or post mobilization, and other times the national security may require. So basically anything they wanted to do to us, including the kid, 18, who has no VA benefits and no DD-214, who just got out of boot camp, can be used in any way they want in the 1990s, unlike the 1980s. This is a very specific era and hazardous duties and give them no health care. You're going to see this report in 1994 shows the Admiral Surface Warfare talk about the 19 differences between the 1980s and the 1990s. I joined in 1994 not knowing any of this. But these are changing days. The total force, the post-Cold War, the New World Order, downsizing, right-sizing, streamlining, whatever terminology or jargon you choose to apply, our service force is getting smaller. At the same time, our missions and responsibilities continue unabated while trouble spots proliferate in the face of the globe. By now, we're all intimately familiar with this brutal reality. I was part of that brutal reality. It was a brutal reality, as the Admiral says. The total of our people, the talents of our people. Rear Admiral Paddock says, our primary contribution to Naval Reserve is talents of our people who are often many years of active duty experience and their background, including they had full-time benefits. Well, of course, I was not that guy. I was a Sea Air Mariner, and I was not having many years of active duty experience, including I didn't have the protection of benefits of active duty, but they don't state the differences because of the benefits are non-existent for me. All must recognize changes in a way of life in years ahead and work constantly improve each Naval Reserve billet and unit and program to both reduce the risk of sustaining a smaller active force and to help lower defense costs and making better use of reservists. Of course, they're trying to get more for less because they slashed the budget in the 1990s, but they're going to use me and my back and no health care, not give me benefits. Report of the bottom up. Review 1993, 1 year before, Secretary of Defense Lee Aspen. Several conditions describe the initiatives defined the period of the Navy's downsizing in the 1990s. Again, it's a very specific era. It's called the downsizing era. And they're slashing budgets, they're slashing, and they're using me beyond my maximum. Active duty personnel, PERS tempo is stress, introduction of technology and the fleet is accelerating. and there is a continuous pressure to reduce the size of the Navy's infrastructure. Well, that's all good and dandy. Currency is perishable. Relevant technologies and warfare skills appear to be a limiting factor. Most often, this can only be found in reservists who are very recently released from active duty, where their skills have not yet degraded. I never had skills that degraded because I never had skills to begin with except for boot camp. So don't you see the problem there? And I didn't have benefits because my enlistment, they didn't attach any medical benefits to it. So I'm going to do these hazardous duties every month with no skills and no benefits. Purpose. The section will explore Navy's motive and approach to employing the Naval Reserve in peacetime to do Navy's day-to-day business. Now they're using the Navy Reserves, including a young kid with no active duty experience, to do peacetime contributory support, which can mean anything on an active duty ship. Hazardous duties, hazardous chemicals, hazardous weapons, hazardous conditions at sea, seasickness, all sorts of things, getting beat up by active duty guys, getting harassed by active duty guys, getting military or sexually traumatized by active duty guys. Anything can happen over a weekend on a Navy ship. Finally, peacetime contributory support PCS by part-time reservists can include duty while performing drills, IDT, AET, AT, AADSW, anything are intended for short-term support. So now they changed everything from the 1980s to the 1990s. Now anything goes for the reservists, including me. There's no protection. They shut down the SAM program. They shut down the frigate fleet training program, and they expect everything for nothing. The bottom-up review, 1993. 1993, 1 year before I joined the Navy in 1994, Defense Foundation Fairness to Personnel, try to be nice. Let's explain some benefits for these reservists that are putting their ass in the line every month to support the active duty. In March 1993, I initiated a comprehensive review of the nation's defense strategy, force protection, modernization, infrastructure, and foundations. I felt that a department-wide review needed to be conducted from the bottom up because the dramatic changes that have occurred in the world as a result of the end of the Cold War from dissolution of the Soviet Union. Again, there's a huge change in the mid-1990s, and I would join in 1994, and we must keep faith in our men and women in America's armed force who have made their service to their country their life's work. People at the heart of the armed forces, and we must not break our bond with them. Again, I'm in 1994, 18 years old, and they gave me a program. They shut down the SAM program. During the era of the shrinking budgets and force reductions, we have a responsibility as individuals remain in the military to maintain their quality of life and ensure and retain their high level of professionalism they have worked so hard to attain. And I was the best recruit in boot camp, and I cared, and I wanted a career, and I believed in this. But they didn't tell me a program was shut down. They didn't tell me they were slashing budgets. They didn't tell me that I had no, all the things that were going to make me sick, that they were trying to make me do, or they're forcing me to do by To achieve this goal, we're implementing a proactive people-first strategy. We must provide adequate compensation, benefits levels, and quality of life incentives. Sounds great, but they never gave the SAM program any ability for health care out of duty. We also have a responsibility to treat fairly and ease the transition to those who will be leaving the military. Well, this is interesting. I was going into an active duty command, active duty combat ship, and then leaving the military every month. But I was still... I was going in and out, and I was never adjusting. It was becoming chaotic in my head. Reserve component programs, 1996. It was 2 years after I joined, and President Bill Clinton says this: our nation has an obligation to all those who wear our uniform, ensuring that our military remains the strongest in the world, leaving no stone unturned in supporting our citizen soldiers, the Guard and Reserve, whom we call increasingly to serve overseas. President Bill Clinton said this. And I believe that's important. Now, check this out. This is where it all falls apart. In 1997, the report to Congress, Means of Improving Provision of Uniform and Consistent Medical and Dental Care to Members of the Reserve Force, done in 1997. And remember, in 1998, I tried to join the Army out of the Navy after I was falling apart, and they disqualified me medically. I was breaking down, but check this out. May not be new information to them. Introduction. During the Cold War, a reservist incurred limited exposure to potential hazards during periods of duty, active or inactive duty. and that was during the Cold War, the 1980s. Since the end of the Cold War and with the drawdown of the force, the role of the reserve components has changed, and the use of the reserve component in performance of operational missions has increased dramatically. Reservists now providing daily support to military operations around the world. This increased use of results in a significant increase in exposure to injury, illness, disease, and death in line of duty. And every month I was going through this significant increase in exposure to all these illnesses. The law and policy governing health care for reservists must be brought up to date to reflect the realities of current role and use of the reserve component. Of course, they didn't do that for me. This is just in congressional reports. They let me serve without any updating of my medical benefits. Current legislation, policy reflect the historic use of reservists by structuring medical and dental care, incapacitation, disability benefits according to length of duty assignment, 30 days or less or 30 days or more. Well, in 2 days, you're going to get beat up. And 2 weeks in the summer, you're going to get beat up in military duty, but you don't get benefits because you have the orders less than 30 days. That's the problem with this scheme. Reserve component currently are based on length of duty rather than performance of duty, unlike the active duty who have no fault insurance. The reserve component have to prove that they're injured by their duty. However, it is the performance of duty, not the length of duty, that creates the risk of harm. Which makes sense. It takes 5 minutes to get injured and 5 minutes to get beat up on an active duty ship and 4 minutes for a guy to try to have sex with you on an active duty ship. Medical insurance protection. Reserve members have a personal responsibility to ensure that they are able to meet the medical readiness requirements for deployment established by their component. However, there's perception, especially with the DoD military medical community, that many reserve component members may lack civilian health coverage. I had no medical health coverage. I was 18 going to an active duty combat ship. No one knew I had health coverage. It's ludicrous. The increased exposure to risk associated with increased reliance on reserve component has resulted in an increased number of line of duty injuries to reservists and has served to highlight the disparity between active and reserve component medical benefits and entitlements despite exposure to similar levels of risk. Every month I'm on the active duty ship and I'm exposed to the same risks, these guys with less training. But here's the problem. Here's an example. For example, in 1997, an Air Force Reserve C-130 aircraft crashed in Honduras. 7 reserve crew members survived the crash with incapacitating injuries. What happened to them? Although the survivors were entitled to incapacitation pay and medical treatment, prevailing restrictions precluded them from being retained on active duty for treatment of their injuries past the period of duty prescribed in their orders. Because they had orders less than 30 days and they couldn't be held on duty. Then no one said, "Oh, that doesn't make sense. We should let's change that." No, they screwed them. Because of length of duty status determines entitlements, their family members were not eligible for health care through the military TRICARE system. But no one thought that was ludicrous and changed it. They just, I guess, one survivor who was married with 3 children under the age of 5 noted, "I never thought in 1,000,000 years that my family or I would not be covered if an accident occurred while serving my country." He also stated that if the reservist guardsman knows that at a time of need, neither his nor his family will be protected, retention will be a serious problem. How can I continue to put my family in this predicament? You know what? I was putting myself in this predicament. Every month I lost my life. My fiance dumped me. My mom had to deal with me losing my life in predicament. She became my caretaker. It only took a couple years. I tried to join the Army. The Army disqualified me medically from transferring because I was so already broken up over 4 years of part-time stress in the military duty with no health care access. And we're going to go over the stressors beyond military sexual trauma, beyond being assaulted on a duty ship. What did they call just operational stress of a combat ship? Well, here's the term. We're going to go over it now. It's called combat and or operational stress. Combat and operational stress is defined as the expected and predictable emotional, intellectual, physical, and or behavioral reactions of service members who have been exposed to stressful events in war or military operations other than war. Combat stress reactions vary in quality and severity as a function of operational conditions such as intensity, duration, rules of engagement, leadership, effective communication, unit morale, unit cohesion, perceived importance of the mission. DoD dictionary, military term. You know what? and a combat ship for 48 hours, not knowing what the hell you're doing, just surviving, going under survival mode, and then the summer 2 weeks, and then sent home. You're gonna feel stress that you never felt before, and no one cares about you. You're sent home. They don't check up on you for the rest of the month, and you have to come back and do it again for years. You're gonna start breaking down. The reserve website here, Navy Reserve website, you can go and find it yourself now, explains on our psychological health outreach program, the United States Navy Reserve, and in fact, this is happening. Navy reservists are definitely at risk for psychological health problems because of this up and down syndrome they put you in. Risk factors of psychological stress injuries is now described by the Naval Center for Combat and Operational Stress. A sailor, each of us has a responsibility to look out for our shipmates, especially in relation to stress injuries that can be brought up in unrelenting high-tempo operations we are now experiencing at sea and at land. Why is this important? Primarily because the person suffering from stress often is the last one to recognize it. And when I was young, I was the last one to recognize it. I never wanted to be the best recruit to go to a combat ship and not know what I was doing. I felt ashamed. Certain factors can make a person susceptible to stress injuries. These factors not automatically mean a sailor will be hurt by excessive stress, but is usefully aware of the risk factors. What are the risk factors? And these were extreme in my case. I was 18 and young and inexperienced, and extremely inexperienced. I was only there for 2 days a month, 48 hours a month at sea. Extremely inexperienced, only partly trained, and you can't even consider that training. I was just in survival mode, being new to the unit or lacking mutual trust with other unit members. Remember, the active duty guys, 150 of them being active duty on the combat ship, were angry at the reserve unit because they were undermanned themselves and they had a lot more work to do than the other regular active duty combat ships that were FFGs. So they blamed the reservists. They didn't want to be there around me. They never invited me to do nothing. I had no mutual trust with them. This is the oddest experience of my life. Combat and Operational Stress Control Manual for Leaders and Soldiers. This is Department of Army studies combat operational stress. And what do they say about combat and operational stress? The reality in all military missions, not just combat missions, but on a guided missile frigate, out at sea, even for 2 days, is a military mission. And put an army, and it can start really adding up stress. It is a harsh reality that combat and operational stress affects everyone engaged in the full spectrum operations. No soldier or family member will remain unchanged. I was taking the stress back from my fiance, who I was engaged in 19. She broke up with me soon by 23 because I was a mess. The Army wouldn't even accept me. And my mom had to watch me fall apart, and I became an angry mess. I was violent. I became violent. Combat and operational stress control is now studied by the U.S. Marine Corps. And what did the U.S. Marine Corps talk about? Well, they talk about potentially traumatic events. PTE is an event which causes an individual or group to experience intense feelings of terror, horror, hopelessness, or helplessness. And I experienced those every month of my life on that ship, not knowing the crew members, doing hazardous duties that could kill you at any given moment, and chemicals that can make you sick, radiation that could burn you. I mean, all sorts of hazards, the seas that were heavy and could make you seasick, sent home and then trying to go to college at the same time, become an officer. Combat and operational stress injury is a bridging concept. They used to consider, in 1916, address the shortcomings in the 1916 character weakness model. They used to consider that combat operational stress was a character weakness model in 1916. Again, mental health has a stigma in the military. You're either weak or you're strong. But now they realize it's actually an illness that can be caused by military stress. The major difference between physical injuries and stress injuries, of great importance to naval and marine leaders, is that stress injuries are not physically visible, are harder to recognize, the burden that bear with great social stigma. They are therefore less likely to voluntarily report their injured individuals. And if you have a lot of pride in yourself, you don't want to admit you're sick, and you don't want to admit that you can't handle stuff. So you tend to hide these these problems, which I did. And it was sad. I was breaking up inside. And the Army found out. Individuals in the red zone may deny to themselves that there is a problem at all, and they may justify their feelings and behaviors of themselves and their family members. They may delay seeking medical care with hope that in time the problem will go away. And that was me at 22 years old. The Army disqualified me medically and psychologically, and I still didn't want to believe. I went back to duty in the Navy, and the Navy never did nothing. Many warriors would rather be told they have cancer than PTSD. What an amazing statement. I didn't want to admit I was sick. You know what? And they wouldn't do nothing about it, and they never even knew what PTSD was in 1998. When a guy tried to have sex with me on the ship, I got beat up by the head enlisted, physically assaulted and threatened, and I tried to join the Army, and I was getting seasick every month. After the threat has passed, if survived, the individual's sense of personal competence and self-confidence may be damaged as a result of not effectively mastering the situation. Even worse, important control circuits in the brain may have been damaged by excessive uncontrolled activation. Well, you know what? I was overly activated. Imagine you're in a fight that you never win, 48 hours a month. You put in a dog ring, and you're going to fight for your life. You're going to survive 48 hours a month, and you're never going to get used to it. Imagine being, and that's how you start breaking. Sometimes they do, but often sufferers don't realize they need help until marriages have been lost, violations of UCMJ have been committed, and other life career damage has been done. And my life has fallen apart. As you've seen, I have stopped working in 2003 altogether. I'm on Social Security disability. I've never been married, never had kids, don't have a driver's license right now, don't have a car, been homeless chronically over the last 15 years, lucky to be alive, been in the suicide hospital. And the Marines associate COSC with the Navy warship. Amazing. I was on a frigate. The first three core COSC and OSC functions can be compared to the broad tasks required to operate and maintain a warship in the fleet. It in the metaphor, strengthening is like arming and equipping the warship with a specific mission accomplished before it gets underway, mitigating and continually providing the warship with fuel, ammunition, lubricants, and other resources needed to operate while keeping the ship well clear of storms, shoals, and other dangers. Identifying is like closely monitoring every available indicator, ship functioning, performing the quickly recognizing when something have gone wrong or repairs are needed. No one was monitoring me, no one was mitigating or continually providing me any training, and no one was monitoring me when things could go wrong or repairs. They just sent me home and sent me home sick. Now, look at this. The Navy studies shipboard roll stabilization human performance, which is basically seasickness. And they studied the frigates in particular. They tried to put roll stabilizers on them because it was a smaller ship, and it didn't even matter. Look at this. The motion conditions were measured and recorded at sea on board FFGs, outfitted with 5 roll stabilizers, and at the bottom, subjects accurately judged non-roll stabilized motion condition to greater than the roll stabilizer conditions, but reported no difference in motion sickness in the two conditions. That didn't help. I was on these ships. You got seasick. I got seasick and sea legs. Physical and psychological effects of sustained shipboard operations in the U.S. Navy personnel studied in the 1990s, right? And 1980s, as I was joining the Navy in 1994. And here's what the report says. Stress associated with sustained military operations is believed to compromise the health and performance of military personnel. Well, they would do this to me every month. Crewmen aboard the smaller frigate, I was on a frigate, reported significantly greater physical and psychological fatigue than crewmen aboard the cruiser. I was on one of the smallest combat ship sizes, and then the seas would beat us up. Results. Most commonly reported physical health symptoms aboard the ships were physical fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, and muscle strain. Imagine the Army disqualified me for musculoskeletal reasons from transferring and spinal problems. Conclusion. Higher levels of fatigue aboard the frigate may be attributed to longer periods of watch standing and less time available for rest because of its smaller complement of personnel relative to the cruiser. Yes, we had a smaller amount of people. And then another Navy report says sleep problems, health symptoms, and tension, anxiety, and fatigue during wartime cruising in moderately high heat, humidity, naval conditions, operating environments. And summary. problem. Previous laboratory field results determine prolonged stress fatigue can lead to human performance decrements. Approach. A cross-sectional sample of officers and enlisted personnel among 9 combat ships were surveyed. Ship types: 2 guided missile cruisers, 5 minesweepers, 1 guided missile frigate, and 1 amphibious transport dock. And guess what they said about that? It's pretty much the same stuff. Youth and experience makes more anxiety. Tension and anxiety. Overall tension and anxiety levels, the cross-sectional sample appeared to be within normal limits. However, junior enlisted personnel E1 to E3 report greater substantive tension and anxiety than higher grade personnel. And there's a reason for this. When you're young and you're inexperienced and you don't know what's going on, I never knew what was going on because it's part-time, you have more anxiety doing dangerous things. It's so common sense. Shouldn't be debated. The relatively elevated level of tension and anxiety among junior enlisted personnel was probably related to inexperience with extended at sea operations and uncertainty and potentially hostile wartime environment. Again, I was training for war and simulated warfare every month, and 48 hours of stress is a lot, mentally and physically, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't adjust to it. And so what is musculoskeletal problems? Well, it's described here. This is one of the reasons the Army disqualified me from transferring. Musculoskeletal problems, ergonomic and injury illness. Musculoskeletal disorders are described as defined injuries, tendons, and disorders of muscle, nerves, tendons, ligaments, joints, cartilage, spine, disc. These are medical conditions that generally develop gradually over time and do not typically result from a single instantaneous event. This definition specifically states MSD does not include injuries, slips, trips, falls, or other similar instances, and this is exactly what kept me from the Army transfer. They said spine and musculoskeletal, read the disqualification. And what can cause spine or musculoskeletal problem of vibrations? The VA reports vibrations of Navy ships. And it's called hand-arm vibrations, using power hand tools, which I used all the time, and hand whole body vibration in operating heavy equipment such as trucks, helicopters, and ships. It's reported as causing health problems with vibration exposure, which I was exposed to every month of my life. And here's another Navy thing: potential hand-arm vibration exposures and tests relevant to U.S. Navy, including my job, which was paint removal, surface preparation, hand grinders, needle guns, hydroblast nozzles, abrasive blast nozzles. Remarks: heavy metal lead can affect a peripheral nerve conduction and may have additive neurological effect. I have anxiety disorder, I have mood disorder, and also was beat up on the Navy ship. In the Navy, and a guy tried to have sex with me, but I was literally assaulted, and they report about this stuff. The Navy is not a nice place all the time, and believe it or not, assaults do happen. And now that I'm talking about it, it should be no surprise I tried to join the Navy. It's called Navy's Bad Leadership Hurting Morale. Look what the old Navy, and there's still some old timers, some salty dogs called Rocks and Shoals. Harsh treatment has long been a hallmark of the Navy life. The young Republic's Navy earned a reputation for severity largely because of whipping. They used to whip the sailors, and in the 1980s, in boot camp, I heard they got more physical. In the 1990s, they started to tone it down, but it's still a pretty, violent place. But, there's been a history in the Navy of physical discipline. The captain was God and ran the ship however he chose, usually with fairly liberal use of corporal punishment, says Jim Valley, former Delaware State University professor, expert on naval discipline. The authority stemmed from articles of government of the Navy known as the Rocks and Shoals, but that changed in the Uniform Code of Military Justice of 1951. But they used to use Rocks and Shoals as the way of beating up these young sailors and getting them to do what they wanted. I was assaulted literally until I tried to join the Army. If you're getting abused day in, day out, you're going to have a sicker crew, which means turnover is going to be worse, which means re-enlistments are going to be worse, says Dr. Donnie Horner, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, who's a management professor at Jacksonville University of Florida, who stays in that environment. I didn't want to stay in that environment. I tried to get out, but they wouldn't let me because I was sick already, and the Army knew that. Panetta would not tolerate bullying or hazing. DOD. I got bullied, hazed, and by the active duty on the ship because they did not like reservists. Reservists do not get benefits. The VA doesn't give it with benefits for reservists, which I've come to find out. They even deny benefits, and that's a form of bullying because they want to say, well, you're a reservist and none of that stuff you went through matters. Well, Psychiatric Unit Operational Procedures in 1954, which is a Navy magazine. This is from a Navy Psychiatric Unit Operational Procedures Navy article. It says it's beyond the power of medical psychiatric profession to select or prepare personnel which will be psychiatrically immune to hazards of poor leadership or poor morale. Imagine that. I could never be immune to this kind of treatment. I'm not Superman. I'm not God. I am breakable. And if I wanted to walk away, people said, well, if it was that tough, why don't you just walk away? Well, I was obligated service. Let's find out what happens if you just walk away from a reserve enlistment, which is just 2 days a month and 2 weeks in the summer. I mean, no, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to walk away. Well, the JAG, or the JAG Advocate General, which is the law of the military who will prosecute you, says this about reserves. Over reserve component personnel on active duty or inactive duty training, a member of reserve component active duty or inactive duty training is subject to the UCMJ. Such members, if I walked away, said, I can't handle getting my ass kicked anymore, or I'm sick, I'm not feeling well, can be ordered to active duty for disciplinary reasons. They could just put you on active duty or throw you in the brig altogether for disciplinary reasons. You can't walk away from even part-time duty. Failure to maintain satisfactory participation may result in the following actions. D, specifically for the SAM program, Sea Mariner, involuntary orders up to 45 days are placed on probationary status for 6 months will screw up your whole career. I was going to college with an idea that I was going to go, and I fell out of college within a couple years. I was overwhelmed with the idea to have a career in the Navy, but I got overwhelmed with my units. Now, another problem. Let's say this guy right here is a great example. They have something called the Department of Navy Naval Discharge Review Board Discharge Review Decisional Document about a guy who had the Sea Mariner enlistment. He joined in 1998, and guess what? He got recalled to Desert Storm, but from his reserve unit. His contract is a Sea Mariner program. He got 2 different discharges, one honorable and one dishonorable, or less than honorable. And check this out. As stated in my application, one of the minimum qualifications for being a firefighter is honorable discharge from service, which was given in active duty, but not from the reserves. This is amazing. He has an honorable discharge from the active duty, his time in Desert Storm, and then a dishonorable or less than honorable, and he can't get a job as a firefighter, and they won't give him relief. In the applicant's issue, the board found that although it's commendable that the applicant participated in Desert Storm, the applicant unfortunately did not fulfill the entire commitment to reserves and therefore was separated, and no relief will be granted based on the issue. He didn't go to drill after Desert Storm because he was depressed. I read the whole docket, and he was having troubles at home, and then his commanding officer just completely disregarded him and threw him in the heat, and he got a dishonorable and he can't get a job as a firefighter anymore. It screwed his whole life up. And this is another. What about the health services of the military? The Department of Defense put out the joint publication. Pentagon put out Health Support Services July 2012, and they talk about healthcare in the military, how important healthcare is in the military. I mean, damn, there are doctors in the military. It says a soldier's health must come before economy or any other consideration. They were quote Napoleon 1813. But why didn't they give me healthcare? Because they didn't put it in the budget for a SAM. Force healthcare protection. Pay every attention to sick and wounded. Sacrifice your baggage, everything for them. Let the wagons be devoted to their use, and if necessary, your own saddles. 1812, Napoleon. Again, say nice things. Military preventive Medicine, Mobilization, Deployment, Volume 1, Historic Perspective on Principles of Military Preventive Medicine. And again, we're going to go over how military preventive medicine should stop sickness before it becomes chronic and debilitating, like it became in my case. I'm on Social Security disability. C.H. Llewellyn, Colonel, Medical Corps, U.S. Army, Professor of Preventive Medicine and Biometrics, says this: military preventive medicine is therefore the central function of military medicine. Unlike casualty management, individual patient military preventive medicine is intimately involved with the military commander, staffs, and units on a continual basis. But my commander and the Army disqualified me medically. The Army never told the Navy. My CO never got the records from the Army. And I continue to serve sick with spine problems. Now I've become chronic. I have 2 hernias and stenosis and disc degeneration and musculoskeletal problems. And I have PTSD, and they never gave me preventive health care. In 1994, I'm going to go over the last part of this, the manpower requirement reports. I learned that the Navy has about civilian workforce. Civilians constitute approximately 1/3 of the Department of Active Manpower. Civilians occupy roles that do not require military incumbents. The civilian workforce repairs airplanes, ships, and tanks, provides research, medical, communications, logistics support, and operates and maintains military installations. Civilians contribute directly to the readiness of the armed forces by providing continuing expertise and freeing uniformed personnel to perform military-specific tasks. Civilian salaries are direct monetary compensation paid to the civilian employees, includes base pay, overtime, holiday incentive, special pay. Civilian benefits include the government share of DoD, civilian health and life insurance, FICA, retirement programs, retirement systems, severance pay, disability compensation, and other payments. But look, would they ever put a civilian in the federal employment for the Navy in 48 hours, a hazardous duties on a combat ship, and trying to become a combat sailor, and all sorts of, and never give them health care when they left, never give them the option to drop into a hospital with health care at the age of 18, and thinking, no, they would never do that. But they did that to me, and now I'm sick, and now I got to prove the VA who's disregarded me, and now I'm lost. And now I'm trying to get my life together. I hope anyone that has any response to this will respond to me. I appreciate your time. Please respond and give me some feedback. Thank you.